Hi everyone, and welcome to the Puppet Building Workshop, where you will learn how to make your own stop motion puppet in whatever style you like, using the different stages and techniques shown throughout the video. Part 1 is to start shaping your puppet using the balsa wood that you have in your pack. This is a really lightweight wood that can be sanded down into whatever shape you like. I'm carving it here using a knife because it's quicker for these tutorials, but quite a lot of the time I use the sandpaper that you have there, starting with the roughest sandpaper that's in your pack. And you will see it there. It has the lowest number at the back of it, but it is quite obvious in the sense that it's very grainy and it's not smooth at all. It's quite rough. Start by using this, as it will shape the wood an awful lot quicker. With this puppet, I'm taking my time to make the shape that I want. I'm looking to make a character that is much like Groot from the Guardians of the Galaxy, so I'm taking my time to shape it like a head shape so that I can use it for animating lots of different little clips later on. I'll be sanding it as well to get that smooth texture, those smooth edges, so it doesn't look like it's chopped in different parts. And this is the advantage that sanding will have over carving like this. You're going to get that immediate look to it where it already looks finished. So do persist with the sandpaper because it will have that automatic nice finish. And if you want it to get finer and more polished, then start building up and using the softer sandpapers that you have there, which will give it that nice glossed over look. Here you can see the sandpaper really making a difference, especially when I start using the much thicker one in the beginning and then start using the thinner one, which makes it look much smoother. After this, I'm starting to use the back of a cocktail stick or a pen to just dig in some long grainy lines because I want it to look like bark. And this is where you can just add your own style to it. You can take chunks off it at the top, which I'm doing here, and then just adding lines. The more mistakes, the better for this puppet. You'll notice in your pack that you have in tin foil the letter M, and then you have another pack that says MS. Open the pack that says M, and on the inside you will see two pieces of clay, one that's yellow and the other one that is grey, much like the one that you see here. Take an even amount of each of those colours, like you can see here, and mix them together thoroughly. Keep mixing until they are all one colour and that there is no marbling at all. If there's any kind of marbling, it will not set properly. And this is where you need to keep on mixing until it's done. For this phase here, I've mixed it fully and I've added to the top of the head of the puppet. Parts of it, because this milliput has almost like a cookie dough kind of texture, I've used a little bit of water and I've dipped you can use a cocktail stick, which is provided, or you can use a sculpting tool that I have there, and just dip it in a little bit of water, and then which will help embed it into the actual balsa wood itself. That's all you need, is a tiny little bit of water. For the top there, I've just moved the cocktail stick around so that it will give that mossy kind of bunchy kind of texture, and it will hold in that place while it's setting and drying. I've also done, as you can see here, I'm digging that tool all over the balsa wood itself because I want to make wrinkles and lines, which are really good in any trees or bark kind of texture. The more the merrier. The rougher you are with this, the more jagged you are with the movements, the better the effect. And that's what's quite nice about making something that is a woodland creature as such, is you can't do anything wrong with it. The more you dig into it, the more you experiment with it, the better it becomes. For the next part of this project, you will have another pack in your box, and it will be in plastic, and it contains felt, some wires, which will be for your wings, some wing nuts and nuts as well, and then some cocktail sticks. Put those to the side and then keep the rest out, which is your K&S, which is your brass tubing with numbers on them, and then your wires. There should be 4. You should have 2 that are slightly thicker wires, and those are 2 thicker wires that are put together, and then you should have another 2 which will have 3 or 4 wires, and they're much thinner wires. Those are for your arms, whereas the thicker ones are for your legs. The reason for that is so that they will last longer and they will be more stable. So the ones that I'm taking now are the ones for your arms, which are put above, and the ones below are for your legs. After this, you'll notice that the K&S are numbered. So here you'll notice that 3s, the ones that are 3 are for the legs. Those will go into the balsa wood, and the 2s, they get put onto the wires like this, with a little bit of milliput, which is your grey and yellow putty, and that will go on the top, and get a cocktail stick and just put some underneath it so that it keeps that in place and it doesn't remove. This is in placement of a glue, and will keep it quite stuck and quite stable while you're animating, and it'll give you the option of removing the legs whenever you want to change the legs over if you've got a different style, or if they break. And that is the reason why we have this K&S, so that you can have replacement arms and replacement legs when needed. So with the 2 legs done, which have the K&S that says 2 on it, I am now moving on to the arms. For the arms, the 1s, those are going to go into the body. So ignore the K&S that says 1s and go to the K&S that says 0. And then do the same again. Put the wire in and put a little bit of milliput on the top, and then again underneath to secure it in place. pieces have their K&S attached to it, I'm going to start gouging out some sockets for the arms and for the legs. I'm doing so by using the top of a scissors, or you can use a knitting needle or a chopstick for this process. As the wood is actually quite light, you'll be able to do so with ease. Once this is done, I will start putting the larger pieces of K&S into it. For the arms, the number 1 K&S will go into this part. And then for the legs, the number 3 will go into those parts. So right now I'm just testing it to see if it fits in fully. If it doesn't, then you need to gouge out fully so that none of it is peeking out. You want that to be hidden. So try and get it as flush as possible. And then with some of that Milliput left over, which is the grey and yellow putty, you just start putting it around the K&S so that it doesn't come out. Try not to get any on the inside of it because it will make it difficult for the arm to slot in afterwards. So just get a little cocktail stick, dip it into a little bit of water, and then just put it all the way around so you're filling in all of those gaps, and that will keep it secure. Now that the arms are done with the 2 pieces of K&S that say 1 on it, and they're secured in place with the Milliput, I'm now going to move on to the legs. With the exact same process, just gouge it out using a knitting needle, the top of a scissors or a chopstick, and put the K&S that says 3 on it into it, and then surround it with a little bit of Milliput to keep it stuck in there so it's secure. With this, you can often find that you'll do a few different tests to see if it will fit in fully. And just keep being persistent with it so that you can make sure that it's hidden in there, because you don't want to see this joint with the legs. You want to be able to have it hidden so that you can stick it in and all you're seeing is the legs and the design that you make afterwards. Once that is done, surround it with Milliput so that it is completely secure the whole way around. into the surrounding joints where you've put the K and S into the body for the 1s for the arms and the 3s for the legs, and you have put the milliput all the way around. Leave it to set for a few hours, half a day, maybe overnight, so that it is fully set in place before you start putting the arms and legs in. Because the worst thing that could happen is where it's not quite dry, you put the arms and legs in and then you end up pulling it all out afterwards. Make sure that you give it enough time to dry. Here with the rest of the milliput that I have here, I'm just adding more of it onto the top of the head, which was already dry anyway. So I'm just doing that for some extra texture, because I thought, you know what, it'll look a little bit better if I just add a little bit more bulk here and having it trickling down to the side of the face here, using the cocktail stick and a little bit of water, and then just fuzzing it so that it looks like moss, which I will later paint. Moving on to the arms and the legs and shaping them so that you have a joint like a knee and a hip joint. For this, you are going to use the Magic Sculpt, and it'll be in your tinfoil pack saying MS. They are 2 grey pieces of clay, and they have a stronger smell than the other ones, and they are, again, they work in the exact same way, but the finish for this when they dry out is much tougher than it is with milliput. So like with the milliput, take a small bit of either one and mix it fully, as long as you take an even amount of each one in the same way as you would with milliput. For this, I'm starting with the legs. I've pulled out the wire at the bottom to make feet. Usually I make my foot quite small because it looks quite nice on a puppet. You can make it any size you want, but the bigger the foot, obviously the shorter the leg it's going to be. So it really is a stylistic choice for you, and it is your choice, and you cannot go wrong with this. It is your puppet at the end of the day. So with this, I am mixing the milliput up so that there's no marbling and it's all the one colour. Once you've done that, then you can start putting it onto the wire itself. Magic Sculpt is fully mixed. I'm going to add it to the wire, leaving a small gap in between the K and S and the actual piece of milliput or Magic Sculpt that I'm putting over it. The reason for this, that I want a little bit of wire exposed, is so that you can have a little bit of hip movement there once you slot this leg into the actual body of the puppet. I make the sausages quite small, quite thin, so that you will have enough choice later on to make your puppet either thinner or fatter as you want, but at least when you make it quite small like this, you have that option later on. I then add so that is your upper leg, that's your upper thigh bone as such, and then I later leave a gap for the knee and then put a little bit more milliput onto the lower leg. You will each have in your pack some talcum powder. Now this only stops it from feeling very sticky, because this like milliput and Magic Sculpt and all of these materials can be quite sticky and quite annoying to work with. So using a little bit of the talc onto the actual Magic Sculpt itself just makes it more comfortable to work with and silkier. It doesn't quicken the drying time, it doesn't slow it down, it literally just makes it more comfortable for you to work with. So that's why I'm using it here. But I'm leaving a gap for the knee, and I'm also leaving a gap for the ankle so that you can bend your foot and you can bend your toes. So make sure that you're leaving a gap there for the ankle as well. advantage to keeping your legs quite slender is so that it'll make it easier for you to animate later on. A lot of my puppets have very slim legs and they're a very slim puppet build, but it makes movements much smoother when it comes to animating. If you've seen any films where the puppets were quite slender, like The Nightmare Before Christmas or The Corpse Brides, all the main characters, the lead characters, are very skinny, but their movements are very smooth and they're very elegant. That's because it's easier for the animator's hands to get in there and grab the leg or the ankle or the arm and move it with ease, so that it's not working around something that's quite arduous and quite built. But then again, it really depends on your style. Sometimes your puppet may not have a lot of movement. You may not want to do cartwheels, but at least give yourself that option, especially with your first puppet when you're learning to animate. It's good for it to be skinnier because it makes it easier for you as an animator to move it. Now that I've completed the legs, I'm going to move on to the arms, putting a small bit of the Magic Sculpt around the wire here, leaving a gap between that sausage of Magic Sculpt and the K&S, which is the brass square piece of K&S, so that you've got some shoulder movement at the top. Once that is done, I'm going to leave a gap for the elbow and then put a small bit for the forearm, so that you have that elbow movement as well later on once it's all set. This is complete. I've done the upper arm, left a space for the elbow, and done the lower arm, leaving plenty of space for the wrist and the hands. I'm going to leave all of these to dry for a couple of hours so that I can paint the rest of the head and add some detail in for the rest of the puppet while these dry. These will take about 2 to 3 hours to dry fully, and then we will move on to doing the hands, and we'll move on to doing the feet as well and adding in the rigging later. The arms and legs are drying, I'm going to use this time to paint the body of the puppet and add some more detail. Using normal acrylic paints, much like these here, I'm going to start taking some out and start mixing some colours so that I can get some textures into the actual puppet itself. As this puppet is a very woody colour, I've already added a base colour of brown so that I can add in more detail, as I'd like some moss and some green colours to be added to it later as well. the puppet has a base color paint onto it, I'm going to add some textures, like dry brushing over it, so that it looks so the crevices look a lot deeper than they actually are, by using a mixture of much darker browns and much lighter browns over it, so that it looks more like bark. Earlier, when I added Milliput to the top of the head in a bunchy textured way, is because I wanted to simulate moss. And in this clip here, I'm adding some green to the top of it, which makes it look like moss. And that was what I was going for, and that is why I did that. Once your legs and arms are complete and the magic sculpt is set, it is now time to start shaping your feet and your hands. So I'm going to start with the feet, and I'm going to unwind the foot itself, the wire there. You can get your hands there just to twist and prise that open so that you separate the two wires. I'm also doing it with the hands here, just unwinding them. They might be a little bit wiggly, but that's okay. You can straighten those out, or you can keep them. In my case here, I'm going to keep them quite wiggly because I want a puppet that looks like a tree character. So I'm embracing all of that wobbling and everything that is a little bit bunched up, because it makes the puppet look better. Unwound and separated all of the wires for the hands and the feet, it's now time to start getting more of that magic sculpt, which is your two greys in that tin foil which says MS, and start taking an even amount of each one, mixing it thoroughly again, and so that you have it there for when we start doing the hands and the feet. For the feet, I'm going to start by putting a heel down for the actual ankle of the puppet. I'm still going to leave a gap between the lower leg and the actual foot of the puppet so that you can actually move your heel and move your ankle later on. You can see there that there is a gap. But also I'm going to put some talc down onto the desk and move that foot around so that you're keeping it flat and making it almost like a little boot, a little ankle boot that doesn't quite go to the rest of the foot. I'm going to do this with the other one as well, so both of them are done at the same time. Now that both of the heels are done, they're flat at the end, you're leaving space where the ankle is, we're going to move on to the hands. And here we are going to make a palm. The reason that we're doing this is that we leave a space with wire exposed for the wrist, and then we have the palm, and then we have the fingers sticking out. To do this, it separates your fingers so that you can move them without knotting up, and it gives you more control when you're animating, as you can move the wrist back and forth and the whole way around and rotate it, while also being able to move your fingers but keeping your palm fixed, which it would be in real life as well. So I'm taking a little bit of the Magic Sculpt and I'm going to press in between the fingers so that they're all separated, and they will be able to dry and set like this, and then you won't have any problems when it comes to your animation. Take your time with this, you only need a small bit, as you don't want the palm of the hand to be too fat. Even when it's only a small part with this, the Magic Sculpt is so tough, it sets like granite, that it would be able to hold anything in place once it's dried. But make sure to leave a space between the forearm and the palm of the hand so that you have that wrist that is free to move and animate with once you're completed. Repeat this process with the other hand as well. Now that your arms and your legs are completed and the Magic Sculpt has completely dried, it's now time to move on to the next part, which is getting the foam which is in your pack and cutting it into small strips and wrapping it around the arms and the legs to shape your puppet and make it a little bit thicker and more shapely. Now that I have cut a small strip, I'm going to start wrapping it around the top of the wire and work my way down, right down until I reach the ankle for this. I'll wrap it a few extra times around the knee so that it builds it up and hides the fact that you haven't got any Magic Sculpt in there, but keeps that nice leg shape and bring it right down to the ankle. Once you have enough, and you don't need to use the whole lot of it, you just literally rip it away. And I use a tiny little bit of your latex there as a glue, which will stick it down at the end. Latex acts as a nice glue for foam. So if you're finding that it is not sticking down fully, just hold it in your hand and tightly, so that the heat of your hand will adhese the latex to the foam so that it stays in place, much like you see here. I've just rolled it around in my hand and held it there, and now it's stuck down. Once that's done, move on to the next leg. The legs are completed, it's time to move on to the arms, and then you repeat the exact same process, but bring it right down to the palm of your hand and don't go beyond that. Ignore the fingers itself. We will focus on that later by using the latex. Now that your arms and legs are done and they have the foam around them, it's time to revisit the feet now that they have set and they have dried completely. What we're going to do now is we're going to add in our tie downs. And our tie downs are the two little hex nuts that you will find in your pack. They're both silver. Here they are here on the table there. And then get a little bit more of your Magic Sculpt and mix it thoroughly. What you're going to do now is place those two little, or one at a time, place one of those nuts on the heel of your foot and get a little sausage of that Magic Sculpt and surround it so that it holds it in place there and keeps it there. Once you have mixed your Magic Sculpt, you will put the nut just where the actual ball of the foot is, and then you will put that clay all the way around it so that it holds it in place. Make sure none of the clay gets into the actual nut itself, and use your cocktail sticks in a rolling kind of manner, a rolling fashion, to knead all of that milliput all the way around to secure it in place. Once you have done this with both feet, making sure that the nut is completely surrounded with the clay, make sure that there is nothing on the inside of that nut which will stop your threaded bolt from securing it at a later stage. And then leave these two to dry completely, putting it on the ground with some talc underneath and flattening it to make sure that you've got a nice flat bottom for the actual shoe of the puppet, much like this here, which will make it quite flat and neat for later on when you're going to animate. Final stages of this project where we need to put the skin over the arms and the legs using the latex. For here I have mixed the latex with a bit of brown paint. Normal acrylic paint will do. So what I've done is I've taken a little bit of the latex out and put it into a pot, mix it with a small bit of brown paint. You don't need too much because it dries an awful lot darker than it is, and the latex already has a white pigment in there anyway. So put a small little bit of latex with the paint, mix it around and get a brush that you don't like, a very old tattered brush, because latex will destroy a brush. It will just make the bristles flare. So get an old, very cheap brush and start brushing the paint on or the latex on in a very thin layer, and then get a hairdryer and start drying it. Latex is biodegradable and it is air drying, so it won't take long to dry in between layers. For this, I'm using a heat gun, but what you need to use is a hairdryer on its highest heat but its lowest speed. The reason for this is so that the latex doesn't splash all over your desk, but also another reason is for aesthetic reasons, because if you put a much higher speed on it, it will ripple the latex, making wrinkles. Now for this particular puppet, I don't mind, because I want it to look more wrinkly. I want it to look quite rough. So I'm not paying much attention to detail here, because it doesn't need it, because that's not the style that I'm going for. But keep on going until it is dried, and then do the first layer for all of your arms and your legs, and then just build it up slowly. Small thin layer of latex, and then dry it, and then another thin layer, and then dry it, and then keep going until you're happy with the result at the end. You will need to gouge out 2 eye sockets, and you can do this using a number of tools that are at home. You can use the back of a paintbrush or a pencil, which I have done here, which you'll see coming up, as it'll get that nice rounded shape in there with no bunching or no carving or anything like that. It's blunt enough that you'll get a nice smooth socket from it. And the balsa wood is also light enough that it will be able to take the pressure of that and hold that shape. So with a bit of pressure, just gouge in those eye sockets there. you've gauged out the sockets so that they can fit the eyes that you have there in your pack, get a little bit of paint and just fill them up so you're not seeing any of the wood, depending on the actual shape and style that you're going for. Because this is a woodland tree character, I want it to be all brown, so for it to all look like wood. So that's why I'm using a little bit of that paint there, so I can fill in those gaps so you won't see it once you put the eyes in. You have 2 white eyeballs with a little hole on the inside that is painted black. This is your pupil so that you can get your cocktail stick and move your eye around. Once the eye sockets are gouged out, you will get a little bit of tacky wax, which I have here, and you will put it on the inside sockets. This is to secure the eyes in place so that no matter which direction your puppet is faced in, the eyes won't fall out, and it will still allow you to move the eyes left and right and rotate them around any way you want and keep them in place while you're animating. For this particular puppet here, even though he has the eyes that you can animate and move, I didn't want that look. I painted the whole eyeball to be black because it felt that it suited this particular character. You can do this yourself, or you can add different colours to the actual eye. You can surround it by a blue or a green or a purple or whatever colour you like so that your iris is a different colour, and you can do this by using paint, acrylic or a marker or a pen or anything, whichever suits the actual look of the puppet that you're trying to achieve. Now that I'm finishing up the eyes, all that's left to do is to add the arms and legs in. You do so by getting a little bit more of that tacky wax and putting it on the inside of the KNS that is in the legs and the arms sockets on the body. This will keep it in there so it's not going to slip away afterwards. So that's if you notice that the KNS is a bit too shiny and they're falling out. A little bit of tacky wax will fill that and keep them in there. But all in all, have fun with this. It is a fun project to do and sink your teeth into. Take your time, don't put any time pressure on yourself, and just experiment and have fun with textures. Add glitter to it, add beading to it. It does not need to look like this. This is just an example of what you can do with it. But thank you for watching and thank you for joining. And if you want to send over your puppets for when you're finished with them, then please do. I would love to see them. Here are some additional notes for those of you that are looking to make a puppet with a very smooth texture. Cover the entire puppet with Milliput. Here it's white, ignore that. The one that you have is still the yellow and grey one that you have there. Mix it fully and with a little bit of water add a thin layer all over the puppet that you have there and allow it to dry, making sure that the holes for the KNS are completely clear and empty, and then surround with talc and wait for it to dry. Once dried, completely sand it. If you would like to add wings to your puppet, then you have felt and some wire as well as 2 pieces of extra KNS with W added to it. With the wire, make a wing shape as a continuous loop and then enter it into the WKNS and seal it with some Milliput like you did with the arms and the legs. Once that is complete, sandwich it between 2 pieces of felt and glue it together with Yoo-hoo glue or any kind of home glue that you have at home, like wood glue or PVA, and then cut out and shape. And that is it. You have an extra pair of wings.